songwriters, gospel songwriters talk about how they come up with a song. They'll hear a phrase, there'll be a catchword or something. Sometimes there'll be a story in the Bible that motivates them. And that's what happened with this song he touched. Bill and his wife, Gloria, wrote the song. And it comes from Matthew 8. And the story of the leper that was touched. We're going to talk about that story a little bit, but it really makes sense if you look at the type that leprosy is in the Bible. It's a type of sin. Not that it's sinful, not in that sense. It's like type and antitype. It's like a symbol of sin. And if you look at that, there are a lot of things that kind of are the same in both of them. And we're going to look at that in a sense. But turn to Matthew 8. Leprosy, the word is used in the Old Testament more than the New. It comes up a lot. It was, of course, a dreaded, terrible, awful disease. It's called commonly Hansen's disease, but it's started by a bacterium. It is a bacterial infection, and things that are bacterial infections are more easily fought by doctors than those that are viral. Viral disease itself has really never been cured in its active state. You can give shots and whatever before, and you can keep some things happening, but once you have it, they can't really cure it. After all that we've done with medicine and whatever, doctors have not figured out how to actually cure a common cold. They can make some of the symptoms less. Maybe some make it the progression of the disease to be shorter or whatever. But as far as curing it, they haven't done it. So when you want to brag about all the things that doctors have done, they can't do some of the simple things you would think. Apparently, not so simple at all. It's been a disease that has been in ancient writings of China, India, and different places. It is cured today with 2 or 3 different medications used at the same time. And it is curable because it's a bacterial infection. But they didn't have those medicines back then. And this story kind of harkens back to the Old Testament because a lot of the laws that were enforced and whatever were way back there. Chapter 8, verse 1, when he came down from the mountainside, now he had the Sermon on the Mount, that's chapters 5, 6, and 7, but when he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. This was audacious. This was out of the norm. For a person with leprosy to come to a crowd and confront somebody. They were supposed to be separate. They had usually there would be a place outside the town that the lepers would be. When you began to have an itchy scaling place on your skin, and that began to form, the disease had already been in your body for some time. Being a bacterial infection, you had gotten it from somebody else, something that other person had used or whatever. And that scaly, white, pale-looking area, you went to the priest. At that time, back in the Old Testament, the priests were the doctors in a sense. And especially with skin lesions. They had to be concerned about that because God was concerned about that. God was concerned about the leprosy. And God made them isolate those people, separate them from the others because it was a disease that could be spread. When it really got into its really bad stages, the bacteria could actually be in the walls of a home and be spread that way in family members and so on. Let's go ahead and just read the story. said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. He was not supposed to be there. He was not supposed to approach people. It's been said that when one would come in contact, close contact with somebody, someone coming at them, they would have to say, unclean, unclean. And some even actually wore a bell. Society made them wear bells so that if you were around them, you knew that you didn't get close to them. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. That spot begins to develop on your skin. You begin to scratch it. You're scared to death. You go to the priest because that's what is prescribed by the law. And the priest does certain things and has you come back later and he looks at it again. And if there's no change, you go close to your house. You don't go to your house. Word is sent in. Bring his clothes. Bring them out. They're brought to a place. You go there and get them. You don't kiss your bride. You don't kiss your kids. You're separated. And usually for life, for the rest of your life. Some were cured normally, naturally, that the Lord cured them, for a reason, don't know, but some did not become cured of that. Now, leprosy is inside the body. It is manifested outside of the body, but it's all over the body. And that places on the skin and whatever is one part of it. Another part is you're desensitized. Your nerves die in those areas. And you cannot feel your fingers and your toes and things like that. And the extremities, like your ears and your fingers and stuff, begin disintegrating. And parts of your body begin to fall off. A finger, a toe. And because you do not feel, you do things that further hurt you. And in the walking in that time, if there was a sharp rock, they didn't feel it, and they went on and maybe had that sharp rock in their sandal or something. So they became more and more, debilitated, or their skin was attacked more and more. There was a movie one time of a man that was a missionary, went to this island and worked with those kinds of people, and he talked about them, the lepers and whatever, and the last letter that he wrote, he said, we lepers. And I don't know the name of the book, it's just a story that's come down through time. Doctors sometimes would very valiantly go and stay with a group of people and help them. But so often they also got the leprosy. Back in Leviticus 5:3, Leviticus is the chapter about the priest and what they had to do and so on, and instructions, and they had to be taught by other priests of the different things to do and how these diseases were and everything. Verse 2 said, in chapter 5 of Leviticus, or if a person touches anything ceremonially unclean, whether the carcasses of unclean wild animals or of unclean livestock or of unclean creatures that move along the ground, even though he is unaware of it, he has become unclean and is guilty. Or if he touches human uncleanness, anything that would make him unclean, even though he is unaware of it, then when he learns of it, he will be guilty. They were really concerned about not being unclean. You couldn't go to the temple. Later on in the New Testament, you couldn't go to the synagogue. You had to stay away for a certain time, certain process, certain things you had to do to become unclean. And then you could go ahead and enter those places and enjoy camaraderie or whatever. In chapter 13 of Leviticus, same chapter, same book, verse 45 says, the person with such an infectious disease must wear torn clothes, let his hair be unkempt, cover the lower body part of his face, and cry out, unclean, unclean. As long as he has the infection, he remains unclean. He must live alone. He must live outside the camp. You just think about the situation the person is in. And, you can't have empathy for people like that unless in your mind you put yourself in their situation. You're away from your family. You can't come close to them. You might be able to see them from afar, but you can't go and hug them or what. No contact like that at all. You can't come in contact with anybody else. All the people that you come in contact with are other lepers. And as I said, sometimes those people died that way. Never going back and never being close to their families. It definitely was a horrible disease, and I'm so glad that it's been more or less treatable, that it can be treated, that there are medications. Let's look at our story. Look at what the man must have been thinking about. He's desperate. Think about this. This is my one chance. I've heard about this man. I heard that he cures diseases. I believe that he cured my disease. But I've got to go to him. I've got to break the law of Moses to be able to go to him. You weren't supposed to touch those people. But the Lord God that lived on the earth, the Son of God, did. He came to him and he said, Lord, if you're willing, you can cure me. The only if in this man's mind is if Jesus was willing to do it. He knew he could do it. And, you look at that faith, and it's an amazing faith that he had to be able to just assume that if God was willing, if Jesus was willing, then he could be cured. Give his life back to him. It's not just like something on our skin and we go to the dermatologist and he gives you a prescription or he puts something on it and it's cured. This is a life changer. This is something that really gives his life back to him. He approaches, as you see here, with great respect. He comes and he kneels before him. He puts himself below Jesus. That's what kneeling does when you do that. And we should kneel as, in a posture before the Lord when we approach him. Not with our fist in the air and not with shouting and whatever, you're going to do this for me or whatever, but coming asking. Asking in faith, but asking in humility. That's what he did. If you're willing, you can make me clean. You can take care of it. I know you can. As we pray to God sometimes, that's not a bad thing to say. Lord, if you're willing, I know you can do this. You may not be willing. It may not be your will in my life, but if you're willing, I know you can do it. Well, that praises God and gives him glory to say that. This is a very quick thing. Just a short little thing happened in the moment of the life of the man and of Jesus. Jesus reaches out his hand and touched him. He touched me. And the song is written off of that. One little phrase right there is where that song comes from. He said simply, I am willing. And he touched him. Didn't take very long. some of the treatments that we get take a long time. And as I found out, month after month after month after month, and then you're not any better, seemingly. But immediately he was cured. It bothers me when I see movies about the Bible and about healing. Like somebody that was lame and they get up and they fall around and they almost walk, and then somebody help them, they walk a little more and whatever, and the cure is already there. I like it when Scripture says he leaped and ran. Words like that to let us know that healing of the Lord is immediate. And immediately this man was healed. Those places on his skin certainly, at that moment were gone. He was absolutely clean. It says, then Jesus said to him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them. And go back to the priest. The priest had authority over this. The priest, announces that you have leprosy, and then, of course, you're banished. And if you are to get healed, then you've got to go back to the priest, and he's got to see you and check and make sure, and maybe more than one time, but then you're cured. And the law of Moses, Jesus wanted him to follow the law of Moses, but that man was cured right there. He was fit to go be back with his wife and everything except for the law, and he had to do that. And so he did that. Then he tells him something kind of interesting. See that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest. Don't go and broadcast this. Now, there's a reason, as we find out in some of the other accounts of this, because it becomes very hard for Jesus to go out in the public in that area. He can only go and kind of be in the outer fringes, away from the people, and because so many people press upon him and they want to see him and want to touch him and want to be healed and whatever. In Mark, the first chapter, verse 40, a man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Filled with compassion, get a little more here in the story. Filled with compassion, Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning, see that you don't tell this to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them. Instead, he went out, began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places, yet people still came to him from everywhere. The latter part of Jesus' ministry was like that. The word had gotten out, he fed them, he cured them, whatever, and people flocked to Jesus. It became harder and harder for him to talk to individual people and to teach in a small group. So many of them were around him. And he tried to, I think of it as like a musical piece, and down at the end of it there's a crescendo. Now that means that it gets louder and louder and louder. And Jesus had entered his crescendo, where things got louder and louder and louder and more people. And it became difficult for him for a lot of reasons. People wanted to be around him, wanted to touch him and whatever, and he was trying to teach many times. It became difficult to do that. Let's go ahead and look at Luke 5. We'll just read. This is Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The story is told not in John. John's different. John doesn't have all these stories like this. This is Luke 5 and verse 12. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell down with his face to the ground and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, three different men telling the same story, but we get a little more information as time goes on. He was coming along. It was just a happenstance meeting, in a sense. Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. Then Jesus ordered him, don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Even the Son of God, even Jesus, got overwhelmed sometimes. And I got overwhelmed a lot in my practice. Sometimes it was out of bounds. It was just too much. I'd see 40-something patients a day sometimes. No lunch. Stay an hour later, whatever, and see those people. And I appreciated the business very much. But sometimes it was overpowering. Sometimes it was too much. And sometimes I wanted to come home and just decompress. And one of the best ways is to get on the tractor or get the chainsaw or the axe and go down and start working. And people said, you're going to do that, you're going to cut off your hand or something, you can't practice dentistry. But that was my outlet to do that. And then on top of that, the phone would start ringing. And, sometimes I'd have to go in a couple of times a night or 2 or 3 times on a Saturday after. Sometimes it just got to be too much. And I can understand the Lord, and of course, what he went through, mine was little. My experience was little. His was big. He had people all around him. But sometimes he would go to private places. He wanted just some rest to get away from it. But still they would come to him, and still he had love for them. He wouldn't run them away or anything. See, this humble man come to Jesus, had faith. The Lord had compassion on him, as one of the retelling of it tells us. And he wasn't supposed to touch the leper, but he did. And, that personal touch means a lot. Sometimes, you deal with people, and I've dealt with mentally retarded, and one dentist told me, I don't know how you do it. How do you touch them? I said, they're just people. Just like me and you. That's my eye can touch them. And we, in Guyana, and the 2 different times that I went down there, some of the situations were really pitiful. And you would have kids come in, and every tooth in their head was rotted out. At 10, 11, 12 years of age. No teeth left. Because they constantly chewed on sugar cane. That was their sugar. They didn't have a lot of sweets from anywhere. They chewed on that. They didn't know about dental hygiene and whatever, but somebody had to treat them. You had to touch them. Of course, we wore gloves then. AIDS caused a lot of things to change in dentistry. We didn't used to wear gloves in dentistry. Up to the time of AIDS, we didn't. We just washed our hands thoroughly between every patient. I'd wash my hands 40, 60, 70 times a day. Sometimes seeing one patient, I would do something, go out, come back. Well, I had to wash my hands again. So sometimes each patient had 2, 3, 4, 5 different washings that you did when you came back into the room. But we wore gloves, and we did the best we could. Sometimes we double gloved in some situations. You didn't know what you were dealing with. How did this man get his faith? Maybe it seen some things, maybe it heard some stories, but that all gelled in his mind. He knew Jesus could do it. What is good for us is trust the Lord and try the Lord, and we find out He's good, we find out He can do things, and then we trust Him with more and more. we might come to Jesus with, I don't know if you can help me in this. Well, that's wrong. You don't come in faith doing that. But come in the attitude of, Lord, if you're willing, I know you can do it. Are you willing to do it? And be ready to accept His answer, whatever it is. Jesus healed and He touched the untouchable. As Leviticus 5 and 3 was forbidden to be touched. And Jesus did it anyway. He was God. You could touch Him if you wanted to. Everybody else avoided contact with that man. Everybody else went around. If they saw Him, they went around Him or whatever. In India, there are in the lowest caste system, or in the lowest position of the caste system, if you will, is the untouchables. Those are the people in society you don't touch. They're not simply the ones that are conceived and are born and live outside of buildings. That's another group of people. But it's the ones that have gotten in situations like this, that are bleeding, that have sores and whatnot, and they're called the untouchables. The leper was untouchable and was looked at that way. And it was a huge thing that Jesus would come and touch him. I think of AIDS as I think about leprosy. Leprosy is in the civilized world has really been taken care of. We know how to take care of it. By the way, leprosy is carried by armadillos. Did you know that? In present day. So we still have to be aware of it. But AIDS came along and we didn't know much about it. We knew people were dying from it. I had a patient, the first one I came in contact with that had AIDS. I didn't know it. And found out later that through a blood transfusion, he was a Sebastian County deputy, lived in Hartford. He had contracted that, and he would later die of that. But we did not know, and we became very sensitive to that after that. And you needed to put certain questions in your medical questionnaire and for new patients. Do you have AIDS? And that was no legal thing against that. In fact, you should be doing it. Jesus wants to make us whole. He wanted to make that man whole. He had compassion. God is concerned about us, and I still believe that God heals, and we can pray to Him in moments of need. I know we use doctors and whatever, but if the Lord doesn't want us to be healed, we're not going to be healed. In verse 36, now this is in Matthew 9, concerning Jesus. When He saw the crowds, He had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Being God, the Son of God on the earth, He could look at the people and He could see the situation of people, and He had compassion on them. He was concerned about them. Jesus didn't come seeking honor from man, didn't come seeking money, nothing like that. He simply wanted to take care of them, to teach them, to save them from their sins and so on. The Jews believed that only God could cure leprosy, and I think that was right. They would be spontaneously cured, they thought. But surely, God had to be involved in it. And we look to 2 Kings 5. Turn there. Now, this is a story of Naaman. interesting story. Let's just read it. It kind of reveals things to us that we understand it. Now, Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. That's Syria. This man was the commander of the army of the king of Syria. Now, whatever Syria did before, mean stuff, to attack God's people or whatever, that was the nation. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, that part of the divided kingdom called Israel had more problems with Syria because they were right there with them, up north. It says, now bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. Now this man, this valiant soldier, this important soldier, had leprosy. And this little servant girl had the answer. Well, if only my master could see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. By all means, the king of Aram replied, I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 talents of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I'm sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy. So this is king to king. Authority to authority. That's the way that he thinks it needs to be done. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Now, he'd had trouble with the king of Assyria, the king of Aram. And he thinks this is just some way that king is trying to cause some more trouble. He says, can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me? This wasn't their first fight. Wouldn't be their last. When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Now, tearing your robes was a big deal. You weren't supposed to tear your robes. You weren't supposed to act this way. And when you act this way, you were totally distraught, totally angry, or something, or both. And this prophet's wondering about it. It says, have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him, to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan. Now, the prophet didn't actually go out and send a servant. It's going to make Naaman mad. It says, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. But Naaman went away angry and I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hands over the spot and cure me of the leprosy. He had already figured out how it's going to be. There's going to be a little pomp and circumstance and a waving of hands and whatever and a calling on God. He says, are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of the waters of Israel? Look around at our rivers and streams here. Pretty clear. Nice to look at. Go to eastern Arkansas and look at the White River. Any of those rivers are full of silt, sediment. They're dirty looking. That's the same thing here with them. They had some clean streams up there in their home area. And apparently, the Jordan was not that clean, crystal clear stream. A lot of farms, irrigated and whatever, and of course the rain would then bring down silt too, so it gathered up a lot of dirt. He says, couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. He didn't understand that the water wasn't going to cleanse him. It was him doing what God said. Naaman's servant went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? how much more then when He tells you, wash and be cleansed? Just go do it. It can't hurt anything. Go do what He said. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all of his attendants went back to the man of God and stood before him and said, Now I know that there is a God in all the world. There is no God in all the world except in Israel. Please accept now a gift from your servant. He would take the gift. It's an interesting story. How is leprosy like sin? There's some similarities. Leprosy is an inward disease. Sin is an inward disease. The sin that we do starts in our heart. When we say bad words, out of the heart the mouth speaks. Well, the bad words are in our heart before we ever speak them. The bad deeds are in our heart. Sin is germinated in our hearts, and then we work it out physically or whatever. So this inward disease was like sin. Leprosy was a loathsome disease. Sin is a loathsome thing. Works out some of the situations in life that are so horrible that we look at. Some of the things that people do to kids and each other and whatever are just horrible, and you don't want to speak of them in public or in nice society because of how terrible it is. The numbness that leprosy has is like sin, numbs us to what is right and wrong. We do enough of it, and that which kind of pricked our conscience at the first no longer does. That which we felt ashamed of when we first did it, if we keep doing it again and again and again, becomes our commonplace thing. We don't think about it that much. Leprosy was a bad sight, but there was a terrible odor with it. Kind of like sin. It's got its ways of bringing out, it seems, the worst in every situation. And it did, as we pointed out, it found its way into the walls of the house and so on. Sin in a family can go from one member to another. Sin so often is taught to children, and they then in turn do that sin or whatever. Sometimes sin in a family can make a person so totally against it they never do that. And that's good that happens. Leprosy is a separating disease. Sin is too. Sin separates families. Mamas and kids, and dads and kids, and kids and kids, and brothers and so on. The leper couldn't cure himself, and we can't cure ourselves from sin. We've got to have the Lord do it for us. And we've got to go to the Lord just like the leper did. We come humbly. And if we're not ready to humble ourselves down, the Lord's not going to listen to us. And I thought of baptism, we turn ourselves over to whoever is officiating in that. We turn our control of ourself over. And sometimes I've had to tenderly talk to somebody that's scared to death of water. I think probably the worst was Merle's mother there at Mansfield. And we had gone and done a Bible study with the boys over some period of time. Well, I didn't know they were in the next room listening. They wouldn't come into the meeting, but they were listening, and then she expressed the desire that she wanted to be baptized. And so we baptized her, but I had to talk to her for a while. She was deathly afraid. Some people think that they will die if they get water over their head, over their heart even. I've heard people say that. And her husband was almost killed in the new Waldron Lake. He went to fish there, and a situation occurred that he almost drowned. Of course, none of the kids then went swimming. They didn't know how to swim. Earl could not swim. Took him fishing, and the first thing we had to do is put his vest on, which I think is a good idea anyway. But he was definitely afraid of water. She was more so. And I just had to tell her, I've baptized several people. I've never had one person to get one drop of water in their mouth. And explained to her that, we're going to put this handkerchief, I don't know if it's handkerchief or sometimes we use paper towel, on her nose. And I was going to be holding that, and I was going to take her down and immediately bring her right back up. I said, I promise you, you will not strangle. And she said, okay. We finally baptized her. The leper couldn't cure himself, and we have to humble ourselves before God and let Him work on us. We can't do it ourselves. We don't have the cure for sin. He does. Same kind of thing as a shadow of that. But Jesus can heal the leper, and Jesus can heal us. No sins can be taken away. Jesus shed His blood and paid the price for sin, giving us righteousness so that in the sight of God we are righteous and without sin. And we can meet Him one day righteous and without sin. And when judgment is, wherever that is or whatever it is, we will simply be without sin because the Lord has cleansed us. Through time, leprosy has been kind of equated with sin. You can read about it in some places in Scripture, and was a problem. But it's been taken care of, and so is sin. There's a way out. Back before Jesus came, there was a mystery about how all of this was going to work out. How God would finally save His people. What He would do, whatever it was, that people would have the satisfaction of knowing they were Christians without sin, that they could face eternity without fear. They didn't know that. It was called a mystery. Hadn't been unfolded yet. But, reading that chapter of faith in Hebrews 11, those people went ahead, had faith in God, and figured out God was going to take care of them. Abraham just knew that if his son died, that God would bring him back to life. Because He promised that through him, all nations would be blessed. And he was that one son through whom the Lord was going to work. And eventually did work with Jacob and Esau, but through Jacob brought the 12 tribes of Israel. And through Judah brought Jesus, and Jesus is the Savior of the world. So, they had to have faith. Even not knowing the mystery. We know the mystery. We've got an advantage. We know how it works out. And we can take advantage of that and have our sins taken care of. That healing of the leper was instantaneous. We come out from the watery grave of baptism. We have sin on us no more. We don't have to scrub anymore. We don't have to go get some medicine or do something or go to a priest or whatever. We've been to the high priest. And we go to the watery grave of baptism. Let's offer this song of invitation. We can help any at this time. Won't you come and let us know as we stand?